Hi everyone, my name's Aaron Smith and I am the UK's Dyslexia and SEND consultant at Microsoft. And my role is to deliver accessibility into education here in the UK. And today I'm going to talk to you about my masterclass in looking at accessibility in schools. And we're going to start today. It's a 3-session event, so hopefully you can watch all 3 of my sessions, and we can go forward. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a wave so you can see me. Hi, I'm there. I am sitting there in my office. I'm going to leave my camera off just because it's going to be a lot easier to move forward for those who are watching. So today's session is going to be looking at accessibility, the concept of accessibility, where Microsoft is going, where we've been, and how we're going to move forward. And we'll look at some of the accessibility built into Microsoft 365 over the next hour, and then we will then over the next session go into more details of things like Teams and OneNote and how we look at accessibility. And in our last session, we'll look at Windows 10. But we will look also next week at administration and how we use Microsoft 365 administration, how we ensure that that accessibility is driven across our school environment. Now, let's first just talk and understand Microsoft. I always start this, and as you can see, I'm using closed captions on my PowerPoint. If you want closed captions on the Teams call, please click on the 3 little dots and click on captions. I have turned captions on both. So hopefully you will see captions across both, and also we can deliver captions on the recordings in the future as well. So let's just talk about an overview of Microsoft, of where Microsoft have come from and why we are looking at accessibility as part of our mission. Now, it says there that at Microsoft, our mission is to empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. Now, I think that when we look at that mission that was set by our CEO, Satya Nadella, who understands disability, I think achieve more is really important. I think for us, we need to see that achieve more is what we all want to do. When we look across the world, when we look across the industry, if we're in education, in business, we all want to achieve more, and I think that's really important for us. And I think that's really useful to see that actually that is what we want to do. And when it comes to accessibility, it's kind of that priority. Now, Satya himself understands disability really well. He understands it because he has a son with cerebral palsy and a daughter with cognitive difficulties. And he wrote this statement: accessibility is a Microsoft priority. We focus in designing and building products that our customers love, that are accessible for everyone and built in for each of us. Now, I think that built for each of us, or built in for each of us, is what I said, is really important. I think that's really useful to look at when we kind of look at that kind of structure at Microsoft. We're really lucky that Microsoft has a Chief Accessibility Officer, Jenny Lay-Fleury. Now, Jenny understands that D&I lifestyle. She's deaf, so she understands that disability inclusion lifestyle. And I think that kind of builds that foundation, it does. Now, for me, I understand disability. Being severely dyslexic and being a person that has worked in the SEND community, so the special educational needs and disability community, for over the last 15 to 20 years, I have seen changes in technology, I've seen changes in schooling, and I've seen changes in education of how we can move forward. As I said, there's my name, there's a picture of me. As I said, I'm severely dyslexic, and then my story starts at age 9. When I was diagnosed as being dyslexic. My parents told me that I was dyslexic, and I was so happy that I understood now why I had this difficulty, why I was finding these things difficult. But then I realized actually this is a negative thing. I actually found very negative about my dyslexia and how I felt that actually I can't achieve anymore. I can't do anything. I'm stupid. I'm not able to do stuff. Why is my sister, who's 3 years older, 3 years younger than me, can read better than me? Why is it that I'm being picked on for not knowing what 1 times 1 is? These are the things that I felt. I felt very isolated. I felt very depressed. I may have been suicidal. I use an analogy that my dyslexia was like going to the dentist. When we go to the dentist, we feel quite stressful because we don't like people playing with our teeth. And that is the point. You see, that's how I felt. Over time, from support from my parents, support from our local education here in the UK. I went to 3 different schools through our education system. So I went to a primary school, a middle school, and an upper school, where I did my GCSEs. And I did leave school with what we call 5 GCSEs. Uh, Highest was a level C in IT, and I did actually go to college and do a GMBQ and a theoretically an equivalent to an A level in IT, and that's when I decided that IT was not for me. I left that, walked into a job doing youth work development, which I got made redundant from. I also then walked into a job being a labourer on a building site, which kind of was quite hilarious for a man that also has neurodiversity, which includes dyspraxia, where pushing a wheelbarrow was quite hilarious. And then I ended up working for a retail giant here in the UK, and I then started to find what I wanted to do in life, and that is I wanted to work in the field of dyslexia. So I actually worked for the British Dyslexia Association here in the UK, and I really enjoyed that. I worked there for 5.5 years, got made redundant. In 2016, I went independent. And that's when I was able to contract to Microsoft to deliver this awareness around accessibility and disability into schools. Now, for me, though, I am a user of this technology every day. So the technology I'm going to show you today and talk about today and over the next 2 or 3 weeks, over the next 2 weeks after today, I use this today and I actually deliver this today. So I want to create independent learners, and that's what it's all about for me. Now, accessibility has a sustainability. And I think this is really interesting, both from an education point of view and from a Microsoft point of view. Microsoft put this DNA into we have this DNA within our culture, within our organization. We have to have had this to enable us to actually grow where we are today. We had to have that culture change, and we have to promote inclusion and accessibility and disability. One of the sayings that I've had in the past that it's not that our special needs children, our children with SEN, are not just that special educator or that Senko's role. They are a role for everyone. We have to kind of embed that. And to get this right, we have to build it from the top. So within Microsoft, Sat and Adela set this mission and this culture of a growth mindset, which is filtered down into everyone. And for me, that's really powerful for us to actually kind of develop that and kind of embed that into our everyday lives. And in education, when we look at accessibility, it actually changes not only our students' lives, but our teachers' lives, our faculty lives, our administrators' lives. It can affect everyone and also create productivity. We have to look at the right product. Most of us are looking at Microsoft as a really grounding point for our education and how we can use it. And for me, it's really important. And we have to then look to the future. How are we moving this forward? For me, it's all about delivering that awareness and that kind of future shaping of our mission to move forward. And I think that actually that in all of us, in part of our daily lives, we have to look at lots of things. This could include training, it could include awareness, it could include demonstrations, it could include digital champions. These are things we have to really think about when we want to embed accessibility into our daily lives. And this doesn't matter if we are a small primary school, up to an academy trust, all the way up to a school district or in local authority. We can do this and we can change people's lives. For me, we do have to think about every child as well. We have to look at every child and how we deliver that. And we'll talk about that when we come to our another slide. But we just want to look at that kind of concept of disability and understand that actually that we have over 1 billion people in the world with a disability. So that's really important. We have to kind of ground ourselves on. Now, when we look at Microsoft and how we develop that, we know that 83% of us around the world will get a disability at working age. 70% of disability is hidden, and that's a really important thing. 13 million people in the UK alone have a disability, and there's about 6.4 to 7.2 million people in the UK alone that have dyslexia. Now, dyslexia is probably one of the biggest hidden disability. And we use dyslexia because a lot of our tools have been designed on that dyslexia basis. But actually, accessibility has gone a lot bigger than that. And it's all because of our knowledge and our growth that Microsoft has been able to do that. So we added a bit more to our mission. And this is some of the things that we will be taking away from this session here is this kind of accessibility mission. At Microsoft, our mission is to empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. With more than 1 billion people in the world with a disability, there are no limits to what people can achieve when technology reflects the device the way they use it. Now, that's really impactful for us as a society. Here in the UK, if you go and look at a cash machine, you'll find there's a jack socket, enabling people that are blind to actually see or hear even what is going on in a cash machine. I'm using closed captions on my PowerPoint, and I'm also using it on the Teams call to allow people to see that captions are available freely. And of course, we will go into that as we go along into some of the features. But for me, I use a mobile phone. I use a mobile phone with Microsoft technology on it. I also use a mobile phone with its operating system on that is very good. And I do use an iOS phone with an Apple phone, an iPhone even, because that what works for me. And that is the other thing we have to take away from this, that when we are planning around our development around using accessibility with our students, we have to ensure that it's the right thing. So of course we are looking at certain things, and of course we want to make sure that's right. And over the next few days, over the next few weeks, we are probably going to create our own accessibility plan for our school, for our organisation, and how we drive forward. And of course, this is available on YouTube, so you can watch it again and kind of get to that point. So let's just look at what Microsoft is doing. Let's look at how Microsoft is developing learners, how we're developing independent learning, and how we want to kind of create that. So we're looking at mental health. We're looking at neurodiversity, mobility, hearing, visual learning. These areas are really important. Now, as part of your ongoing journey, I do recommend that we all go away and look at that web address there, that aka.ms/accessibilitysway. So aka.ms/accessibilitysway. This is a really useful tool where you can go away and research on certain things. And some of the things we'll be looking at that in our last session in a few days' time, in a few weeks' time, of how we develop that. For us, it's all about delivering independent learning and how we can deliver that to our learners, to our students, and to our teachers as well. So we are very much willing to do this and move things forward. For me, I'm all about looking at learning and learning outcomes. But what we need to do is we need to now think about accessibility as a whole kind of point of view. So I've got on my slide here the word accessibility. What does it mean to people? Does it mean that it's a change in landscape? Does it mean that it's a leveling a playing field? Does it mean that we are putting a ramp in for someone? Does it mean that we are changing the way that things look? Are we making things better for everyone? And that's actually what accessibility is. So within our last session, we will hopefully kind of given us lots of ideas of what is available. And what we will do is from that, we will develop this accessibility plan for our environment. How are we going to move things forward for accessibility? How are we going to develop it for our schools and for our organizations? And that's the most important thing. So the question for today is to take away what is accessibility? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to our users? And what it is for me is that for me, accessibility is being accessible and enabling me to hit the same thing that everyone else is doing. And that is the most important thing for me. Being able to deliver the same thing to everyone without having to ask, without having to see things differently or seeing things differently even. So if we take a website as a prime example, for me, accessibility is having a phone number, not having just an email box. Yes, having a chat window, an automated chat window is really good, but I can't type and spell very well. But actually having that phone number where I can ring and talk to someone, that is the biggest accessibility tool in my book, being able to have a conversation. Being able to achieve is also the other thing. And these are things that we probably need to think about when we look at accessibility around our environment. What are we doing? So we have to remember also that we're not just looking at students. We have to think about students is one thing, but think about our teachers as well. And for me, that's really important. Now, what I want to show you now is I just want to show you some ideas around using Microsoft 365 as our base point, and how we use that to actually support our learners and what we have in there. So this part might be, for some of you may understand this already, and it may be this first session, but I wanted to start from the beginning and work our way up to actually going forward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring this into my window and just stop the sharing and start the sharing again to make sure that we can see it on screen 2. There we are. So I'm now in screen 2, and of course you can't see my captions on the PowerPoint, but hopefully you can still see captions on the Teams call. If you still need captions, you can do that, and we will talk about captions as we go along. But I want to talk about Microsoft 365. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview, just so we know that this could be there, that all of us hopefully could actually understand what everything is. And we have Outlook. Outlook is for email. Now, we're going to start with Outlook just for a starting point. Just think about accessibility. Outlook, how is it accessible? So I'm just going to click on it and show you something here that you may not know. So I'm going to look at this first email here. Let's go and look at my email here, my analysis email. Now, these analysts emails are really useful. This is actually quite useful for focusing on time, seeing what we've done, what we've got booked in, what we haven't done. For single tenant users, this is really useful, really powerful. So I'm really happy with this. And this is one of the things there. But I want to say to you that I can't read it very well. Now, if we click on the 3 little dots at the top here, we have this amazing button here that says Show in Immersive Reader. Immersive Reader is an amazing tool, which I'll go into more details, but it is there. And that's a really useful thing to actually know, that actually in our email, it is there. So the 3 little dots at the top, it's there. It's not in these 3 little dots. It's always in the one at the top, unless we pop this out of the window. But actually, for me, that's one thing. So that's that thing, and that's really good. That's really useful. But I want to talk about this. This is our calendar. Now, why is our calendar so important to us? Why is our calendar the one that we need to think about? And actually, our calendar is really useful for us. Our calendar is really kind of powerful for us, especially for us which have additional needs and how we use it. How many of our schools are using their calendars to the full advantage? How many of us are teaching our students to use calendars? For me as a dyslexic, without my calendar, I wouldn't be with you today. I wouldn't be sitting here at home in the UK in the rain talking to you if it wasn't have put into my calendar, because I would have forgotten because of my dyslexia. Having a calendar and using a calendar and inviting people and inviting students to things, sharing homework with people using a calendar can be really accessible. Giving people that kind of thing, saying that homework is due in 3 days' time concept is, again, really thinking outside the box. Using your calendar to its full advantage. That is what I always say to people. That to me is what's really powerful, really useful, and really understandable for our learners and our users. I am ecstatic about using calendars to its full advantage, giving people ownership of their calendars. Now, we may be doing this in our senior leadership point of view, but are we doing it as for our students as well? That is something that we have to think about as well. That is really interesting. So that's one thing. So that's one thing about calendars. Of course, the other thing with calendars is then we can also, the benefit of using calendars online is we can also flick this switch. We can also turn a Teams call on. So again, really useful to enable us to actually use Teams as a communication tool of what it's designed for. I think I really like this. I also think that actually categories are really useful for email and for calendars. For me personally, I've started using them to really kind of see in my calendar, what am I doing today for these different events? As I'm a consultant, I work with lots of different companies and organizations and do lots of different things. And I kind of need to plan my time dramatically so I can do that. It's really good. So that's something we have to think about. The response questions of how we want people to respond to us, if this is busy, if it's free, if we're away, if it's working elsewhere, these are things we can look at. Scheduling assistance to make sure we can schedule that. And that is really useful. It is to help us to actually look at other people's schedule. Using our calendars to full advantage can be really useful. And opening our calendars up. It is opening our calendars up to allow other people to actually do it is, again, another useful thing. It is. One of the things that's also here is if we look here, we've got lots of things we can talk about and play with. One of the things that we can also do is kind of have where it's located, who's being invited, whose options, the time zone, and we can also add descriptions in this, which comes an email. It is, which again is really useful for our learners. The one thing about it, if we're using the desktop version of Outlook, not the online version, of course, we can also add private events, which we can't do on the online version at the moment, but that's not a problem. This to me is kind of where we need to think about stuff. I think when I click on this, we've got kind of our outline of what's going on today, and we can use that to its full advantage. Calendars are really important. So I think that's one thing that I wanted to mention when we're thinking about accessibility. And today's kind of looking at products and services and what we've got. How is OneDrive accessible? Well, OneDrive is instantly accessible for the one thing that everything is stored in one place. The benefit of having stuff in OneDrive is that everything is here. Now, my OneDrive here is not very easily, it's not very good, very well. But what I would need to do here is actually develop this and put lots of nice little folders in there to actually really maximize that. And that is something that we should teach our children. We should teach our children file management to really help them, and our students file management to really move that forward. So what we're going to now look at is we're going to actually look at some of the features in Microsoft Word that are available around the ecosystem, looking at how we would use that product called Immersive Reader, which I showed you in Outlook. So I've opened a Word document here, and these are some of the features that are available to us. And there's some amazing features in Word Online, and of course on Word Desktop, depending on your licensing agreement. But Word Online is free to everyone, so that's really useful in schools. So I've got my text here. It's my geography homework. I don't know what it's about. I haven't been able to read it because of my dyslexia. If I go to the View tab, we will then find the Immersive Reader button. Immersive Reader is an amazing tool. If we haven't known what it is, this is a tool that allows us to manipulate our text for us as individuals. This is independent and enabling for us. So that's really kind of useful for us. I've got this text here and it's spaced it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size. I make it bigger or I can make it smaller. I've got a couple of fonts to choose from. I can choose it into Comic Sans, which is really dyslexia friendly. I can turn that spacing on and off. I can pick background colors, which I can choose from. I'm going to use this pinky one. I'm going to use this purpley one here. I also can turn formatting off. So if you see there that the Study of Earth's landform at the top was in bold, that's now turned off, which is again really useful. And this is kind of just that starting point, manipulate that text for me as a dyslexic. It is. I can go into this kind of grammar options and do syllable division, which really helps our dyslexics to actually improve, to break down words. It can help lots of people to break down words. I can pick out nouns. I can pick out verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. But my nouns are the same color, so I'm going to change them to blue. So I can now pick out all my nouns, but also that people are colorblind, I may need to think about that. So I can now change the colors on it. So we can now look at these colors and now see I have the labels, not colors. I can now have the labels on there, which enable us to move forward. And that's really powerful for some learners. It is that actually enables us to actually see these and we can move them forward. I think it's also useful we can change it. And just to point out something here, that if you see features, I would always recommend looking at user voice, Microsoft.user voice. Have a look at that website, user voice. Just type in Microsoft user voice, because actually that's a really useful way for you to get impact into what you want within the structure of Microsoft. The feedback came back that we wanted to change colors. We got them. That's how it works. We can do so much more with this text. So we can, of course, do reading rulers. We can focus on lines. We can focus on the lines and removing that impact of all the text and single line, 3 lines, and a paragraph. Again, really useful. I have Picture Dictionary turned on. I can click on the word study, and there's my pictures. I click on the word landforms. There's my landforms. Chord has got loads of pictures in. Geography's got a good pictures in. Rivers. Sometimes has got one. Impact's got one with like stars on it, and Earth. Really good pictures there for people that have communication difficulties, people that are non-verbal. We can really use this to support our learners, and I think that's really useful for some of our learners and to move forward. But of course, the biggest thing about this is this button here. And I'm just going to check. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second because I want to check that this has been ticked. So now you should be able to hear the text when I read this out loud.
The study of Earth's landforms is called physical geography. Landforms can be mountains and valleys.
So you can hear there that was an English it was an English accent because I'm in England, but it wasn't the best accent. Now, of course, what we can do here is we can change to a female accent or female sound voice. Let's listen to this voice.
The study of Earth's landforms is called physical geography. Landforms can be mountains and valleys.
So that there is actually reading in a neurotech voice, a new neuro voice, a more natural speaking voice, a really good voice to listen to from our point of view. It's a real kind of simple voice, not very computerized, but still synthesized. I think that's really interesting for our learners and really supportive for our learners as well. So I would definitely say to you, you look at the voices, but of course we can change the speed as well.
Valleys. They can also be glacier or rivers. Landforms are sometimes called physical features. It is important for students to know about the physical geography of Earth.
Now, when we look at that, just point out something to you. We have the synchronization. The synchronization is so important for our learners because actually, if we think about that concept years ago when we would do it, when we were in our younger age range, in our primary schools, we were using the finger pointing to read words. That is what that's doing. That is so useful for our learners. That is. So to me, I think that's a really interesting thing we have to think about, and we have to look at that going forward of how we support our learners like that. So again, thinking outside the box, moving forward, how do we support learners? But what other things can we think about when we're actually in our schools? What about learners with English as an additional language, our EAL students? English as an additional language is really important. We have to kind of communicate with people. We've got lots of languages to choose from. So let's choose Hindi. There you go. The whole document's now in Hindi. I can also read out in Hindi as well.
पृथ्वी के भूरूपों के अध्ययन को भौतिक भूगोल कहा जाता
What I can also do, of course, is change it to say, we can go back to Arabic. And if I turn the whole document Arabic, reading Arabic.
وتسمى دراسة أشكال الأرض الجغرافية الفيزيائية. يمكن أن تكون أشكال.
Now that's really important that actually, if you notice that it's reading the other way around. And that is also what I think is really powerful for me. And that's a really useful thing to learn. So when we come about reading and how we read stuff, it's really useful. Now we've looked at Immersive Reader in Word. Now this, of course, is in Word. It's in lots of products. It's in Word. It's in OneNote. It's in Teams. It's in Outlook. It's really kind of useful for our learners to think about that. And I think that's the things we have to think about when we're actually supporting our learners. The other thing about it here, though, but it's also in Edge. So I'm using the Edge browser here. I'm using the new Edge browser. And I'm just going to scroll down to a news article that's happening today. I always kind of like looking through these. Let's see if there's anything here that we can come up with. So let's have a look at this one. This is the OnePlus 8. I have no idea what it's about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. I'm going to press the right mouse button. And I'm going to press just here. I press this button here. It says Read Aloud.
The OnePlus 8 represents a culmination of trends. It brings the brand's famously low price, high-spec phones ever closer to, if not quite on par with, the polish of other flagship phones, and in several ways, it also sees OnePlus adopting some of its competitors' design philosophies.
That's a really interesting thing there that I'm actually being able to understand what this is about straight away. I'm listening to it, it's reading out loud, it's doing the synchronization. Again, really useful for my learners. I think that to me is really kind of useful, especially when we're looking at a web page, and this is any web page we can look at. We can now listen to this and see how this is really powerful for our learners. And I think that actually when we look at the concept of design and how we look at our website design, that's really useful. But as a dyslexic, as someone that has a neurodiverse tendency, I've actually gone back to I'm reading this and I've actually scrolled down and I've started looking at this article here. And I want to know more about this article. But actually, I should be learning about this because this is my piece of homework. What I'm going to do is up here in the top right-hand corner, or I could press F9. There is my Immersive Reader button. So what I've done is I've now removed all them distractions, and I've brought back now this kind of overview of what I'm looking at when it comes to this learning of understanding and kind of reading a web page. Again, really useful for me. I can do the read aloud. I can do all the features I showed you earlier about changing the background. I can do the focus line. I can even pick out syllables. I can pick out all the nouns. Again, really, really useful for kind of editing and researching is what it's designed for, which is really kind of useful. So we've looked at reading quite a lot there. So we looked at reading on Word, we looked at reading on Edge, and we've known that it's in lots of products like it's in Outlook, it's in OneNote, it's in Teams, it's in OneNote Windows 10 app, it's across many operators that read aloud feature is. But now let's think about writing and spelling. How do we then develop them kind of knowledges for writing and spelling? So of course we've got this button here. In the Home tab we have Dictation. Dictation is such a powerful tool. I'm going to use my voice to dictate what I'm saying, full stop. Now, that to me is so useful. Let's just move that down a bit so you can see. I've got this nice little control panel, so I'm going to move here. That is so useful. Why is it so useful? Because I'm developing my own vocabulary, but I'm also developing my kind of imagination from my head and putting it onto paper. How empowering is that for some students? How empowering that is for some teachers? If you're teaching in an environment where you are having to do a lot of writing, how does that help your productivity? These are things we have to think about. When we are planning this kind of global structure of accessibility in schools, we have to ensure that we are understanding what tools are available. Today is looking at tools. Tomorrow, next week is looking at tools and features from an administration, and a bit more of a deep dive into this accessibility world within Microsoft. For me, these are kind of the core features. We're looking at Immersive Reader, looking at Dictation, but Dictation's got so much more. I could do this. Let's turn this on. So it says US English. Let's change this to UK English. I'm in the UK. Let's start this again. My name is Mr. Smith. New paragraph. If I keep talking and then stop, and then carry on talking, you can see that there is full stops appearing every so often. You see there that it actually is giving me options to change this. You've got lots of things here to change this. And this actually is another feature. Let's just carry on with Dictation just for a few more minutes. We can change it so it has auto punctuation. We have this amazing help tab here that can give us lots of information about how we can develop the strategy using our settings. This is where all the features are, our policies. But also in this one here, look at English. These are all the phrases we can use in English. We can also go formatting, which is new things. This is amazing. So for me, we can actually do lots of things now. So let's try some of these. My name is Arran Smith. Pause dictation. Is it going to carry on dictating? Yes, it is. Start list. So some of these commands aren't there yet, but as you can see that these commands are coming, and this is really useful. So these are things that I was trying, these are things that I've seen that are new. So I haven't yet tried these features yet. So hopefully these will be coming soon. And this is a really interesting way of how we can then start manipulating our text. So this is really useful to actually see that at the beginning we just had these kind of simple things, but now we've got some editing features coming, some formatting features coming. This is going to be really interesting for us in the future. Now, I said to you that dictation is a really powerful tool for productivity, and it is definitely moving to that way. And I would definitely recommend playing around with it. But I said to you here that there was some things that was kind of appearing when I was dictating. And this is part of the editor function. And again, this is an editor function that's really useful. It's got grammar, it's got kind of lots of things here. Basically gives you an editing score. And it says here that my spelling, I've got one spelling mistake. So it's asking me here, I'm going to change that to go to. It's got 3 grammar errors. So I'm just going to change these. Yes, it is. R. And then you can see here that it's got some formatting issues. So I am. There's another formatting issue somewhere. I am. And basically now I've got a 100% score. So now everything is correct. I've got no kind of, I've been inclusive, I've got punctuation, I've got no sensitive references, I've got no voluntary references, and basically readability, dictate of words, to read, how many seconds, to speak, number of seconds, review comments. So saying, my name is Arran Smith, pause dictation, saying, could I change this to a different word? Transcription. This is really, really interesting how you can use this to really kind of embed information into your documents. And again, it's a feature we have to teach and we have to learn. Of course, that we know that. So if we keep moving forward, so I just keep moving forward and having that kind of feature forward. And that's the most important thing for me. So we've kind of looked there at reading and writing across Word and across that. And of course, we've got lots of other things to look at. We've got stuff in PowerPoint, OneNote, and we're going to look at them as we go. We're probably going to just touch on OneNote now, because I actually want to show that actually in OneNote, these features are. I'm just going to go into this one here and just point out that actually these features are available. So we have got here in the View tab, we have the Immersive Reader button, and of course in the Home tab, we have the Dictation button. There's one other thing in the View tab that we need to think about, and this is again in Word. It's across the operating system. It's across lots of things. Here, if we look in the View tab, it's here. I've lost it now. So it's within the Editor tab. So the big thing we have is our accessibility checker. Our accessibility checker is really useful, and it's saying there that this is not a friendly link, and basically we want to recheck and we need to work out how we can make this a friendlier link because it's not very accessible for our users. And these are things we have to think about when we're actually doing stuff. This tick box here that says simplified ribbon, which is really useful here. So this, we're using a simplified ribbon here. We can use a more in-depth region. We push the arrow down there. That's a more kind of user, like one we're more used to when we're looking at Word desktop. But simplified ribbons are really useful for our learners. And I would definitely say to you, switch simplified ribbon on and off. And of course, it's telling me to leave that because I've just changed it. But I think we need to think about these things when we are doing stuff. We always need to think about more things. We have to always think outside the box of how we make things user-friendly for our learners. So I now click on Home, it's there, and you can see there that the ribbon has changed. And for me, actually, the simplified ribbon, putting simplified ribbon back on is actually so important because, again, that's helping learners and users. So what do we need to think about when it comes to that accessibility point of view? Actually, when we look at accessibility, it's really important to start now understanding. So we've kind of now started a little bit of our dive into what is available. But what is it for? What is it enabling people to do? So what is that read aloud feature enabling people to do? What is that immersive reader enabling people to do? Well, of course, it's enabling people to read. Now, one of the things that we have to take away from this is that it's not a cheating tool. And never ever think that they are. These are a level playing field tool. These are an independent learning tool. These are a productivity tool. These are what we have to think about. So when we look at read aloud as a primary feature, what is that doing for us? So in our school environment, let's think about reading. So where is our elements of reading, and is there a way of supporting reading using this feature? How do we deliver that? How do we deliver training? And this will be something that we talk about a lot more. And when we look at the structure that I'll pull together for us on our last session, when we look at that kind of way that we have to go around to support our learners and support our teachers as well. Now, these features are across many places. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to show you a few of the places where these features are. And for me, it's a really useful thing to look at it when we jump over to our inclusive classroom and how we move forward. to actually look forward to our learners. It is. So we've kind of looked at how we then look at that inclusive classroom and how it comes about and how it is in OneNote and how it is in OneNote for our learners and how it is in some of our other places. Apologies there, my computer has decided to do something I didn't want it to do, and I want to jump back to this slide here. So we know here that we've said it's in Edge, but of course it's in lots of other places. That Immersive Reader tool is in Teams, and now we're going to go into Teams in a lot more detail in the next session. We're going to talk about Teams and we're going to talk about administration. We're going to talk about how we look at Teams and how we create accessible classrooms, in accessible online environments, and how we use Teams from an accessibility point of view. But I wanted to say that it's in there. It's also in products like Flipgrid. So if you're not using Flipgrid, do recommend Flipgrid. We can see here that it's in the Flipgrid tool and we can use it in there. It's in Minecraft Education. So Minecraft Education, it's got a lot of text you have to read, and basically that we have the Immersive Reader tool in there. It's doing that text to speech. It's doing that synchronized highlighting. It's doing all the features that we've shown you, like the changing of the text, but also things like Picture Dictionary. We have words like creeper, which are part of the words in there. It's in Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Forms is one of the amazing tools that we haven't really mentioned today, but Immersive Reader is in there. I recommend that one of the things you do is play with forms. How can we use forms to support our learners? How can we use forms to develop our learners? How do we use forms to get information from our learners and support them? That's really important. Forms is a key part of our accessibility plan and how we do that. Teams assignments has this built in, has Immersive Reader built in. Microsoft Whiteboard has it built in as well. All these features have got them built in. Even Dictation is in PowerPoint, which is really useful. We also have this available for our cognitive services. What this means is that people can actually buy this for their websites or their apps. A really useful tool there. And of course, I mentioned about the way that we process voices. Kind of really useful. To me, this is a level playing field. We are putting people on that level playing field, a life-changing experience for our learners. And that's really powerful for them. Now, this is the slide I want to show you now, and we just want to talk about this slide here. So this slide here shows you where all the features are that we've talked about today very briefly. We've talked about Read Aloud, where is it available? We've talked about line focusing and spacing. We've talked about color background changes, syllables, line focus, parts of speech, translation, picture dictionary, dictation, and then the last one we haven't spoken about today is math to speech, because math is something I'm going to touch in another session. For me, these are where all the features are. So if we want to just look at that Read Aloud feature, 5 versions of OneNote, 4 versions of Word, 2 versions of Outlook, Teams, Flipgrid, Whiteboard, Forms, Office Lens, Minecraft Education, and the Edge browser. I haven't mentioned the Office Lens, but I would recommend to have a look at it. It's an iOS and Android app. It's your scanner in your pocket. It's a really amazing tool to play with and a really supportive tool. I would definitely recommend how you can do that and how we can use that to move it forward. So I definitely say to people that that is a really powerful tool, and I say that it's kind of interesting of how we move it forward. Dictation is there. Dictation is only in one version of Outlook Desktop, but I want you to see that actually it is moving forward, and that is a really important thing. If we've got teachers that need to send a lot of emails or staff that need to send a lot of emails, why are we not using Dictation as part of that productivity tool? It's proven that it works really well because I'm actually using Dictation to deliver closed captions. Yes, a few things may be wrong, but actually it's really important. It's really thinking about outside the box, and that's what we have to do. For me, it's all about that accessibility journey and how we have to move things forward. And I'm just jumping forward to a few more slides just because I want to talk about stuff. It is. I'm just jumping through because my computer has decided to go wrong here, and actually it's pulled up the wrong presentation. This is one of the links I want you to take away today, actually. I want you to take away this link here. I want you to look at this link as part of your homework, as part of your development over the next few weeks, that we will look into this in more detail in our next session, in our next hour session. Today was very much an overview of what's available, and then we're going to deep dive into it in the next session of how we can do it straight away. aka.ms/inclusive ultimate. I recommend you look at, there's lots of videos on there, there's lots of conversations on there that you can go away and look at. There's lots of videos of how we can develop stuff, and that to me is really important. But the point about this is also of how we are delivering it. Everything is built in. It's mainstream, it's non-stigmatized, and it's free. Because actually these 4 things here is what we need to be looking at when we are actually developing our plan. So how do we move forward? How do we move forward with accessibility? How do we move forward with inclusion? And that is important. We are building that succession for sorry, I'll start that again. We are building that foundation for success. So over the next few weeks, we're going to look into that. Now, the last session will actually develop you a plan with you and my thoughts on how we develop accessibility in schools. And that can be adapted to your organization. And it is part of that wider digital transformation and digital inclusion plan. It's also part of your digital literacy plan. It's part of your school development plan. These are all things we have to think about, and how we then move that further forward, and how you take some of the things away from today and the next 2 sessions to move that forward. The next session, of course, we will deep dive into things like Teams. How do we use Teams to its full advantage? How do we use Teams for accessibility? How do we make things more powerful for our learners, which is really useful. We can also then look at things like, how do we use touch? So how do we develop touch for our learners? How do we develop using things for our learners when it comes to supporting them? And again, that's really useful, it is. And it's really interesting how we do that. So we have session 1 today. We've kind of looked at the overview of what's available in Word, and in PowerPoint. We will go into a little bit more detail about PowerPoint in the next session, of course, and how we can use that to its full advantage. So next session, in session 2, we will be looking at PowerPoint, we'll be looking at Teams, and then we'll be looking at also other Office 365 things. In session 3, we'll be going into the admin, and then the planning, and SLT, and then training, and how we can develop this into our learners, and how we can create a structure for us within our education environment to move forward. For me today, it was a shorter session. I wanted to kind of deliver this within a certain amount of time for you to kind of start going away and taking away some information. Because I want to finish with the last thing here. It says there, putting accessibility at the heart of learning with accessibility tools built in for everyone creates independent learners and ensure all students achieve their full potential. Now, I wrote that back last year, and for me, that is really important. For me, it is as a severely dyslexic adult, I want to develop this to make it go further forward and move things forward. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to thank everyone for listening for this session. We've gone over a lot of things. I'm going to stop the recording. And of course, if people want to email me, I'm going to go to my last slide that has my email address on. So if you want to email me, follow me on Twitter. Don't worry about this code. Sorry, clicked over the wrong slide there. There we go. Let's go back a slide. So you've got that. There's my email address. By all means, you can follow me on Twitter. You can reach out to me in my email address there, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you about how we can help you move accessibility, move things forward for you within your school. So I'm now going to stop the recording, and basically if anyone's got any questions that's on the live call, by all means, you can ask me them.